Hello, how are we? It is the Late Challenge. It's the 34th Late Challenge. It's the usual people presenting it and talking on it and all the rest of it, so we won't do all that. For this show, as a jumping off point, we've got a question. And the question is this: is Premier League football fucked? The inspiration for this one is twofold. One was a big spike in a clip of us talking about Manchester City and the charges they face. And two was a piece in The Athletic last week. So let's start with that piece then, shall we? So the headline was, Manchester City's Premier League charges discussed by UK government and its embassy in Abu Dhabi. Nothing to see there. The piece went on, the UK government has admitted its embassy in Abu Dhabi and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in London have discussed the charges levelled at Manchester City by the Premier League, but are refusing to disclose the correspondence because it could risk the UK's relationship with the United Arab Emirates. This follows a similar thing coming out not so long back about the negotiations between Saudi Arabia and Newcastle over the ownership of Newcastle, or the takeover of Newcastle, and how too that would benefit the government and the geopolitics and all that kind of stuff. So as a footy fan, because I am still one, believe it or not, I still do go, I still do love the sport. I've moaned like fuck about it over the years.
Which is part of being a footy fan.
Yeah, I almost gave it up at one point and seriously, thought about jacking the lot in and, going living on a farm or something. Well, I did that as well. But now I'm still here and I'm still going. And I find it mad, mate, that this stuff goes on and it's just discussed on a relatively low level, really. I mentioned to you just before we started there that I had the radio on this morning, Talk Sport, and they were talking about football clubs dominating the eras. So they were talking about Liverpool, Man United, that kind of thing. Then they mentioned Man City. And Jim White, for some reason, can't get it in his head why people would look at Manchester City dominating differently to those areas we've just mentioned. I mean, the big one, Jim, is it looks like they're breaking rules. And other clubs are following those rules, and so therefore, surely we've got an unfair competition. But yeah, just to bring it back to this piece then, that in particular is just a bit mad, isn't it? That the government is now getting involved in all this. And the reason I say is the Premier League fucked is, so there's a white paper and, there's going to be a regulator, but this feels like by the time we get the regulator, one, it won't have the necessary teeth, and two, the horse is already bolted. We've essentially got two clubs in the top flight of English football owned by states.
But there's a three as well, which I haven't thought about before this came out. The government is responsible for coming up with the white paper and sorting out the regulator and the rules around regulation, and then creating it, and then it becomes independent, I guess is the plan. But at the same time as that, it's doing this behind the scenes. So how can the process to create an independent regulator, in inverted commas, be independent and trustworthy and reliable to do what football fans want it to do, whilst at the same time the government's dealing behind the scenes? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there has been football supporter involvement in it. Like the Football Supporters Association's been involved in it. Kev Miles, who's the head sharang at the Football Supporters Association, was sat on a parliamentary committee and spoke and all that kind of stuff. So the idea of that Tracy Crouch report was that it did sort of go through a bit of a filter. What I don't get about it is that it's come out the other side and there's nothing about states owning football clubs.
But that's my point, I guess.
Yeah, and there's nothing about leverage buyouts either, but I feel like that's a different point than the one we're trying to make in this particular show.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like, it's conspicuous by its absence and you're like, okay, so why is that not in? And it's like, oh, well, and think about this, you know what I'm like on this, and people who've been listening and watching for a while now get to know how my brain works on certain things. And it's like, think about it really right. In real life, we talk about government, we use words like government. Whenever I was advising people as a lawyer about HMRC, right, the tax man, I'd always say the same thing to them, like, everyone talks about HMRC like it's this big, bad cloud. I was like, it's not. What HMRC is really at a low level when you're dealing with them is Bob. Bob is 55 years old. He does a desk job. He does paperwork for his life, for his living. He's not happy. He never thought when he was a little kid he was going to be a tax man. And now his job is trying to get people to pay their fucking tax. It's a shitty job. He's not happy at home and he's got people on his fucking back. But he's got a mortgage to pay and he doesn't want to leave his job. That's what you're dealing with. And when you can get into that mindset, it makes it easier to deal with the tax man, inverted commas. When we talk about the government, it's the same thing. What's the government? The government is a load of people in a building, in different offices, in different places, trying to sort shit out. Their main incentive is to stay in power. The next incentive after that is to have an easier life as possible because they're humans. This is, we have these high ideas of what government should be and stuff. It's bullshit. These are humans, flawed, like the rest of us. There's no way in a million years. Think about any office you've ever worked in your life. You have worked in big corporate law firms with different departments. And if the interests of one department clashed with the interests of another department, the bosses of those two departments would have a little chat. And they'd say, hey, mate, do us a favour. Can you stop doing that thing? Because you're causing me shit. And it's causing us then, as a company, more shit. So what can we do as a company to make sure that our departments work well together, that's in everybody's interest? That's what goes on at government level as well. So the people doing we'll do the independent regulation thing are also chatting to the people over here and they're going, do us a favour, just keep fucking state-owned stuff out of it. Because we're having these chats with the UAE and Saudi Arabia and we could do with them going well. Because we've got this arms deal.
Yeah, and we want the billions of pounds.
Jim down the road's doing the arms deal and that's worth billions to us.
And the clean energy deal.
Exactly.
And all that
if
kind
you
of
put
stuff.
in a thing about state regulation in football, they're going to pick up the phone to Jim and say to Jim, what the fuck are you doing?
And they clearly have, because The Athletic has put in a Freedom of Information Act requested all correspondence between, London essentially and the British Embassy in Abu Dhabi relating to the charges against City. So they did that in April. In May, the FCDO confirmed it does hold information for them within the terms of the request, but was delaying handing over correspondence while considering whether it's in the public interest from an international relations perspective. Then, in September, it said, we acknowledge that releasing information on this issue would increase public knowledge about our relations with the UAE. The disclosure of information detailing our relationship with the UAE government could potentially damage the bilateral relationship between the UK and the UAE. The Athletics appealed that. They asked Man City whether they had any comment. No comment. They asked the Premier League whether it received any correspondence at all from UK government's employees in relation to the charges levelled at City. The Premier League did not respond. I mean, having done some public relations stuff, it's a big thing to say fuck all. Because we all know how saying fuck all looks. And no comment on things is you decide that there isn't a statement you can make that makes this situation better. And so you leave a big gap, you leave a big void, you leave a silence, which people will inevitably fill and people are filling. And we're trying to fill right now.
And to stress that point, they're going to fill it with stuff that's not good. And you still can't come up with a statement that's better than that.
Exactly.
That's what's going on.
Exactly. City, of course, have said many times that they are not state-owned or funded. The club's owner, Sheikh Mansour, is Vice President and Deputy Prime Minister of the UAE, and his brother, Sheikh Mohammed, is the President of the UAE. But it's got nothing to do with... They've got nothing to do with that.
I put this in an agenda for us to talk about months ago about Chelsea, similar thing, but we're sticking to this. And it was the same thing, like that phrase just is the one that should just be plastered over everything. And if the government had any sense of humour, and I think Boris Johnson is an absolute incompetent buffoon, but the one thing he did have was humour. I could imagine him saying, and if you said to this as an advisor, he'd go with it. Just keep saying, there's nothing to see here. Just keep saying it. There's not, and plaster it on walls. Yeah. And when there's a statement, just say, there's nothing to see here.
Just keep sharing the gif of Frank Drebin when the fireworks factory's blowing up.
I love it. You keep putting it in our WhatsApp group. That's what they should use as their official reply to everything. There's nothing to see here. Just walk away.
You just receive a gif. That's what we've got to say about it. We know it's a big, massive shit show and you're all looking at it, but there's nothing to see here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you know, I would suggest we have a conflict of interest here. I don't think that, you know what I mean?
That paragraph you just read out, it's stuff like this where you can see me, like I laugh because I've got to the point in my life and with life that I find you just have to laugh because it's so fucking ludicrous.
It's mad, isn't it?
That, you know, if it was a child, we talk about kids on our Patreon, get on our Patreon. But like, we talk about dealing with kids and blah, blah, blah. It's the type of thing if you were talking to a kid, like I had it with the boys at the weekend, like me stepkids. I had to put them in this big bubble bath and blah, blah. And all of a sudden I noticed there's stuff floating around in the bath, like polystyrene.
Oh.
You know, I knew you were going to think it was poo. How did I know that was going to be your first thought? The way I'm getting into your brain, like your neural pathways. There was stuff floating around the bath, polystyrene. And I just suddenly went, boys, what? One of the boys stood up at one point. There was polystyrene on his body. And we like, I filled the bath. I know there was no polystyrene in there before you got in. So I want to know what's happened that there is now stuff in there while I've been out the room for a minute. They both swore blind, like nothing to do with them. It wasn't them. And I kept saying to them, you won't be in trouble. Just tell me the truth because it's important. I know what it is. I was doing the whole like, because it might be dangerous. I don't know what it is. We might have to go to hospital. I went to them individually, like, no. And it's like having that conversation. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm a grown man.
We can see.
Like, I can see the stuff in the bath. And you, just by you saying it wasn't you, well, it wasn't me. And there's only 3 of us in the fucking room. And when you read things like this, like, the club's owner, Sheikh Mansour, Man City have reiterated many times that they are not state-owned or funded. And this is exactly the same pattern with Chelsea. The club's owner, Sheikh Mansour, is the Vice President and Deputy Prime Minister of the UAE. Let me say that again. He is the Vice President and Deputy Prime Minister of the United Arab Emirates. His brother, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, I think that's how you say it, is President of the United Arab Emirates.
Yep.
Nothing to put that. We should put that up on the screen.
And guess who the sponsor?
Nothing to see. Yeah. And it's like, lads.
I know.
It's like, no, but when I'm dealing with City, I just put all that out my head. I put the UAE out my head when I'm dealing with City. It's just about the football.
I honestly think it's mad how it's discussed. Like, it's not, one, for me, it's not discussed enough. And 2, it's sort of like, the nothing to see here thing, like people just get sick of it because it's being dragged out, I think. You know, like, so these charges have been levelled at them. One of the things we're going to talk about, or one of the things that's in the agenda anyway, whether we get there, is the fact that they are obviously doing their level best to drag all of these things out, wrap them up in legalese, you know, get bigger and better barristers. You know, you've got their own fans going to a match with a banner celebrating a lawyer, which is absolutely wild. And it's, you know, this isn't footy. This is nothing to do. And, you know, and singing in the ground, we'll cheat if we want. And it's like, but can't you see the bigger picture here? Like, can't you see why it's weird. I think they've sort of like made themselves, I think internally, they're making themselves like a victim. You know what I mean? They're saying like, we should be allowed to spend this money. We don't want to comply to FFP rules. Who said we want them? We just want to come in and spend our money how we see fit. And if they put rules in the way, well, we'll just keep getting lawyers. You know, and that's essentially being said in some of the leaked emails. And I just find it mad how much some of their fans will defend, you know, and say like black as white, essentially. You know, like, so on the clip I mentioned before of us talking about it once before on a show, for some reason that's had this big spike and loads of people have started watching it. Who knows how the internet works or why. But some of the comments on there are just things like, it's out of context, lads. What is? Because the club is saying that as well. The club have said that before, but what is? Tell me what is out of context. What the stuff that was leaked, tell us the story then, because you keep saying you've got irrefutable evidence.
I was just going to say that line is the one, isn't it?
Where is it then?
Go on then.
Show us it.
Yeah.
Print it. Yeah. Publish it. Do a podcast on it. Make a video about it.
Shut us all up.
Yeah.
That's it. It's easy, isn't it? Just shut us all up, and we want to go away as well. We want to stop talking about it.
Yeah, of course we do.
Like, it's if you're right, just fucking show us you're right. And I said to you before we started recording, like, do the technical side of this, speaking of someone who used to be a corporate lawyer, like, you see the language, and I know it doesn't, there'll be people out there going, you don't need to be a corporate lawyer to know this. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Robbo knows this stuff by reading it. Like, there's certain language that when you read is not the language of innocent people. Like, innocent people just defend themselves, show their defense, and that's it, generally speaking. Unless there's some other situation around it or circumstances that mean they can't. All of the tactics that are involved in what City do, all of the language around it, is the language of top lawyers getting a client off with something that they know they're not meant to. Like, I remember when it first came out, like, how did they get away with one of them? And without going into the reference in the details,
charges,
it's time barred.
Yeah.
Now, as soon as you see that, I just laugh again. I laugh. So I'm like, time barred isn't innocent. Time barred is lawyers went, right, I've been in rooms like this. A partner walks into a room and you're like, right, this is the problem. We need a solution. Go and find me a solution.
Yeah.
And a team of people
those rules,
go out.
find something.
Exactly. And I've been that lawyer who's been able to go, look at this, boss. And then ran me own law firm.
I mean, it's a completely different part of law, isn't it? But it's like that fella who got the reputation for being able to get you off like driving charges and that, isn't it?
He had Ferguson
like saying he needed a shite.
His name was Mr. Loophole.
Yeah. And that's all. It was finding some kind of little thing wrong, some procedure that hadn't been followed, some bit of paper that wasn't signed or filled in.
100%.
And like you say, it's not about, you're not innocent.
It's not right or wrong. Yeah.
It's just finding a loophole, like you say, because that's what he was called, wasn't it? To get you off. And that's all they're doing with it. What I don't get about it is, well, I do get it and I don't get it because they bang on about, and all political parties as well, not just the Tories and not just Labour, all of them at different times try to leverage sport and try to leverage football and tell us that they care and tell us that, they know it's the national sport and they know it should be protected. And then it isn't. So, the sports minister, Stuart Andrews, said that state ownership of football clubs will be a matter for the Foreign Office. Why? Can't it be a matter for the regulator of English football? Makes more sense to me. And, we've said on shows, you've no doubt been on the shows, over the years that, the way they treat football is weird because it's not Weetabix like Hicks and Gillette said. It's not just some product. It's not like, if I don't like something about Liverpool, I can't go, oh, that's it for me in Liverpool now. I'll go and support Everton. Nah, do you know what I mean? That isn't how it works. Like we've put a life into this sport, into this club, into supporting Liverpool, and we can't suddenly rob out of it. We can't reverse and go somewhere else. So respect that and respect what clubs are in communities and how important they are to cities and to people and all the rest of it, and treat them like that, protect them that way. And they're just not doing it. We're watching our national sport and our game and our clubs be manipulated by forces from other countries and doing fuck all about it.
But there's loads in this. But look, I do want to throw something in that I mentioned a few weeks ago. And interestingly, I think we only talked about it briefly, but it's worth putting in this now in case there are any Man City fans watching or listening.
There's at least one. I hear Joe.
and other people who will be shouting things at this. So I want to say, for the purpose of that, I've been, people have picked up on me doing this in the past, playing devil's advocate. There is an argument in here, and I'm not the first person to mention this. I've heard Gary Neville say it, that FFP was brought in by powerful clubs like us and Man United to close the barn door, like to pull up the drawbridge and say, we don't want fucking competition, so we're going to stop anyone with huge wealth coming in and disrupting this apple cart because we're quite happy with how it is. Thanks very much. And there is a point in that. There is a good, solid debate to be had around 100%. That. And at the same time, if that's your beef, challenge it. Challenge that properly. Because you've got all that, Joe. You've got all this access to boss lawyers and all the rest of it. Come in and say the rules that you've put in place, Joe, creates unfair competition. And they could lobby the other clubs. They could lobby other clubs in other countries and say, this is wrong and this isn't fair. And, maybe there's other ways to achieve what you're trying to, like maybe a salary cap, maybe a transfer spend limit, whatever. Yeah. But it's not this, and we don't think this is right, and this is why. I'd have sympathy for that 100%. If it was that. Me too. But the way they go about it, where they feel they can bully them the ways out of it with money and lawyers,
Well, how can someone who isn't invested in the club have any sympathy for that approach? It's a grim approach.
Yeah.
It's like, it's an approach that surely makes loads of people go, who the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And why do you think you can just turn up here? And okay, you'll get City fans saying about the good they've done as well. I get that as well. I've worked in Manchester for 10 years.
I was going to mention that as well.
I understand the city, and I understand the area of the city that their club is in, what it was like and what it's like now, and how, them being the owners has benefited Manchester and things like that.
Yeah.
I get it. But nevertheless, if you're a supporter of another club and you're, you always get really intelligent comments on the internet, don't you? I'm sure we're going to get them for this show, cry more and all this kind of shit. Well, all right, if you want to call it crying, fine. So I've watched one of the greatest football teams that Liverpool's ever had be pipped for the title, having racked up record points totals. And we won one title and it should have been 3 because yous were cheating. So if it was the other way around, wouldn't you cry? Do you know what I mean?
And there's another argument to that, isn't it? With our own fans would say this, and I am creeping more towards this, having defended them for a long time. If I was a City fan, my reply to that would be, well, go on, let's boil it down. What did we do that's cheating compared to what you did? To beat you to these leagues? You could have bought more players. You chose not to. And maybe our owners would say then, well, FFP. And City be like, fuck, what's your point? You do what you need to do to buy the players you need to buy, because that's what we're doing. And I'm almost tying myself in not in this conversation myself, but I think there are times when we've just discussed this, and I've had a bit of grief stick for it lately. We haven't bought players, and it's sort of dressed up as we can't afford to. But there's an element of me who's always like, is that true though? Aren't we just making...
at the accounts, can't you? And they're not, but they haven't got as much, because this is the thing, the idea is that you spend within your means, isn't it? And so you can see what money Liverpool generates. And when we had the last set of owners, we said we want Liverpool to be operated in a sustainable way, spend the money it makes, and blah blah blah. And from what I can see, again, I'm welcome to someone sending me something else. That's what they pretty much do. And okay, times are where you think, should have bought that player, blah, blah, blah. But City are just operating on this other level and not being honest with it. And sponsorship deals that stink, payments off to the left that they're not, talking about, they're not announcing, they're not, and all trying to put legal blockers in when they're asked for papers that every other club's provided.
I think one of the big things in this, as you go through the details of this and stuff you've put together in the agenda, I think that over the years, there's been too many. I mentioned to you off a week or so ago, I've been watching the Prime documentary about Newcastle, and I'm only 2 or 3 episodes in, but it's hilarious. It's just a fucking PR campaign. And there's an element of my heart bleeds for you type thing, but it's the same in that. I think they have certain things which act as red herring distractions. So it's the big ticket stuff. So it's the shirt sponsorship deal. I remember a few years ago when I got a mate who's a City fan, and everyone was kicking off about the shirt sponsorship deal. And if you looked at the actual numbers, it's Newcastle's. Everyone was booting off about Newcastle's new shirt sponsorship deal, saying it's well bigger than the last one. And you're yeah, but they've become a Champions League club in that time. So you would expect them to get a big...
Not a man playing in Saudi's colours now and all that.
Well, that's another point. But I think the bigger things, when you get in behind the scenes and you add it all up, there's a list here you've got. And the one I was laughing at before was, it's things Mancini's first contract with City was for a base salary of 1.45 million net of tax. But his company was also allegedly paid 1.75 million a year as a consultant for Al Jazeera, for which he had to commit to coaching at the club for 4 days a year. Now, they're the bits, it's all of those adding up behind the scenes that no one looks at. And everyone's just whatever. Because the sponsorship deal takes the attention and then they can dismiss the sponsorship deal. Do you know what I mean? And that's the problem. You've got all of this stuff going on behind the scenes that all adds up.
100%. I wanted to read out a letter as well, which was sent to the Sports Minister by a human rights group, Fair Square. They laid out why state ownership is the greatest threat to the sustainability, integrity and vitality of football in England and beyond. It says here, we're seriously concerned that there is no reference to state ownership of football clubs, obviously referencing the white paper that I was talking about before, and that a proposed fitness and propriety test adjudges suitability for stewardship of a club to be based solely on an individual's integrity, honesty, financial soundness and competence, and takes no account of whether a prospective owner is acting in the political interests of a state. The arguments against allowing states to control football clubs ought to be self-evident and result from the powers they can exercise. Only autocratic states with power and wealth concentrated in the hands of unaccountable individuals are able to sanction the use of sovereign wealth to finance football clubs. Autocratic states abuse their sovereign powers in various harmful ways. They use force arbitrarily and often violently to establish and maintain power domestically and to wage war abroad. And they have the capacity to dispose of vast sovereign wealth without any oversight or transparency. Their involvement in football leaves the Premier League inextricably entwined with and exposed to developments in the UK's foreign policy. Their primary motivation for controlling football club is typically for the reputational benefits that can accrue. One thing I haven't put in here as well is that, there's the interview, isn't there, last week, where it's with one of the Saudi lads, isn't it, basically? And he goes, yeah, we're sports washing, yeah, and... just not asked. There's no attempt to PR it. It's yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And
it's put 1% on the GDP of the country, so we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
It's okay, well, at least you're fucking honest then.
But I said that was my reply to you when you said to me, I was honestly, I'd rather they did that.
Yeah.
I was fucking front it, sound. And he said, didn't he? Call it what you want. I think the quote was, if I'm going to add 1% to our GDP, that's sound. And if I can get to 1.5%, I'll do I'll just keep doing it. And you're okay, great. So, and it's funny when someone says something like that. It's okay, well then debate then.
Yeah.
All the people who are doing no, you're well, the fella who's doing it has just said it.
Yeah, he's said it. There's another quote as well from Fair Square where it said, no football club that is run responsibly and in the interest of its fans and local community can compete with the club that is run in the political interest of an autocratic state. The government deserves credit for listening to fans, and there's much to applaud and support in the white paper, but the powers of an independent regulator will be critically undermined if nation states control the top of the football pyramid, and the harm that flow from allowing autocrats to control the game go far beyond the reputational damage to the clubs themselves. This is a critical juncture for the future of the game and the opportunity for the government to draw red lines when it comes to state ownership, but instead it risks rolling out the red carpet to states that pose arguably the most serious threat to the long-term vitality and reputation of English football. And, meanwhile, while we're all just talking about it, Qatar have already had a bit of a pop at getting Man United. You know what I mean? And that's ongoing, isn't it? You know what I mean? The Glazers seem to be asking for absolutely daft money and suddenly have put the price up. And I guess you would do if you knew that a state is interested in your club. But, again, while nothing happens, something happens, do you know what I mean? So, we're not closing the gate and here's another state coming along. And, you can imagine the league, can't you? That's the thing that sort of troubles me as a footy fan, as a Liverpool fan. I think about the league in a few years and think, well, what? So essentially it would be the UAE v Saudi v Qatar under the premise of it being football clubs.
Well, this is the counter argument to what I was saying before, making a bit of a hash of it, is my sympathy. I've been thinking about this a bit in the past few days because I knew we were going to do this, but my sympathy for clubs like City, for FFP being brought in, sort of goes out the window when there wasn't a question about state ownership in football before, was there? So when we were closing the doors, when the likes of United and Liverpool were we want to let's have a little chat and bring in these rules. In the history of football club ownership, there was never the question of an oil-funded state buying a football club and just being able to fund it with unlimited wealth and power. And now that is the point, now that there is the case, there's even more of an importance on doing something to protect what are we all trying to do. And for me, it's go back to the drawing board, because the question for me is, what are we all trying to achieve here? What do we want? Like, do we want a fair competition in which, like, going back to, we've talked about this on our shows over the past few months. There was a time when you could come up into the top division, the first division, and teams would get promoted and then win the top division.
Yeah, or at least have a crack at it.
They could go from there. The gaps weren't that big. Those days are long gone. And obviously, like, we had the anomaly of Leicester a few years ago that won the league. You feel like as every year progresses, that becomes less and less likely to happen again.
Yeah.
And despite my, attempts to even help defend City, the stats speak for themselves. Like, they won the treble last year. If it wasn't for Liverpool, they'd have won the last 6 Premier Leagues. And they've started this season winning their first 6 games. So they look like they're going to win it again, which would mean they've won 6 of the last 7 and 4 on the run, which has never been done before in English football by any of the superpowers. Like, Liverpool never did it. Man United never did it. These generational greats. And, I've said as well, like, again, I'll defend City on one more point, which is Pep Guardiola. Like, we've seen... I think we're going to talk on our football show about, we'll mention Chelsea. Chelsea's the perfect example of how it's not just about money, because you can throw loads of money at things and it'd still be an absolute shit show. No, I mean, and Everton are a similar example.
Of course, he deserves some credit, but then equally, when this is going on at the top, well, it taints it, doesn't it, surely?
I think so. And I think if I was him, I'd feel like it taints it a little bit. Because it's like...
Because he's fuming about it, isn't he? When you remember him, like, when those charges were announced, and remember, like, they threw it on them, didn't they? They didn't know it was coming. And I remember him doing a press conference where he's like, we've deserved to win all these titles and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, but you're not in control of this bit, mate. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, maybe you should try and distance yourself a little bit.
As a sportsman and a competitor, and a great competitor, by the way, and maybe the greatest manager of all time, doesn't he want to be competing on an equal level? Like, doesn't he want to test himself?
Doesn't he want it to be sport?
Isn't it a bit like going into a heavyweight fight, knowing you've had some steroids and beating the other fella and thinking, well, could I have beat him if it wasn't for that? Like, I watched mad example, but I watched Rocky 3 at the weekend, and the story in Rocky 3 is that, he won the title by beating Apollo Creed. And then all his title defenses after that, Mickey was hand-picking his opponents to protect him. Because he was like, Joey, and he says in it, you shouldn't have recovered from that fight. Like, my job was to protect you. So to keep you the champ as long as I could, but you can't fight this fella. This fella's a monster. He's going to kill you. And Rocky at that point is like, well, you've just, like, my whole career then is ruined. Because I want to be able to know that I did it.
Wish this fella would fuck off with his hammer. I don't know if he's going to hear it.
I'm trying to ignore it and be like, can they hear it? Is it that thing?
Well, they might be able to. They might edit it out because they're like the brilliance in these studios, and I know you can sometimes do things like that. But if you hear it, someone hammering, just some bellend deciding to hammer in the middle of our show. Yeah, thanks for that, mate. Maybe it's Man City.
Yeah. They're up to all kinds. But I do think, and it's funny when Guardiola gets annoyed about it. I think that is an element of it. Like, surely he wants to know that he went head to head with Klopp and beat him on a fair and level playing field. And if Klopp did have the resources he had, would he have beaten him as many times?
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it, to hear, like, what other people in football genuinely think of all this. But, you know that they don't really talk about it publicly. But equally, and I always say this about the Premier League, people say the Premier League. And it's like the Premier League's a group of clubs. And so a group of clubs has decided that, we want to go to town on City because we're not happy with what they're doing.
Well, something else I wanted to throw into the mix of this, which is off to the side, something else that's creeping up in the background, and I've seen a couple of people mention, but not many. I think 10 of the Premier League clubs are owned by Americans now, and 14's the magic number, isn't it?
Yeah.
For like votes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, you need to watch out for that one as well then.
Yeah.
Because what if all of a sudden there's 14 clubs owned by Americans?
Yeah, all of those other things we don't want. Well, we are going to do the
well, in
Super
America
League,
we do this.
Yeah.
In America we have a closed shop. In America we don't have relegation.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we'll do all of that now.
Yeah, and we'll play matches in the United States because that's been, mentioned over and over, hasn't it? And then it doesn't happen, but it's like, we'll have a weekend where we fly all the teams there and we play a game there. That's been proposed.
Well, and then come back down to basics, like,
And what did he do
what
with
is
the
our
Chelsea
national
fella?
sport?
The Chelsea fella, what did he wanted some mad thing, didn't he? Like was it a Northern Cup or some bollocks?
Oh, North versus South game.
No, yeah, that was it.
Yeah, but in fairness, like that's the type of thing we used to talk about when we were kids, wasn't it?
Messing.
Again, yeah, that'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But he's saying it properly, and like people like Klopp, like fuck it, lad.
Who's insuring the players then?
Yeah.
And where are you fitting it in?
Where are you putting the game in? Where are we playing it? Fuck me, fellas.
Just on, the general footy's mad and the Premier League might be fuck thing as well. All the stuff that's sort of come out and again, it's sort of, I think it sometimes gets lost in the conversation. I just wanted to reiterate some of it because it's quite wild. So, Boris Johnson's government worked for months to encourage the Premier League to approve the Saudi-backed takeover in Newcastle. That was a Guardian investigation. You can go and read that if you want to. He then also said in a parliamentary answer to the Newcastle Central MP, the government was not involved at any point in the takeover talks on the sale of Newcastle. A fucking lie.
Yeah.
I mean, to go back to the show where we just talked about all of his lies, bolt on that one as well.
But this is something else that is worth mentioning, and this may be another show in the future. Like we talk about the likes of Saudi and the UAE and Qatar, and we talk about autocratic states and we talk about human rights records. And at the same time as all that's happening, most people are not aware of the slow creep in countries like ours of government taking more and more control and more power and getting involved in more and more things that have got fuck all to do with them. And that is a much wider political conversation about how much we all want our governments involved in our lives. And that's a huge political conversation. But I can't imagine there's very many people who believe that it should go as far as it's starting to go. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is just a football conversation, but there's a bill just been passed about like the government being able to shut down and censor social media stuff because they decide it's not okay for you to say or do certain things, and you're like, sorry, we're just circumnavigating the courts now. Literally what our country has been built on, like a fair and just legal system. Now it's like, oh no, we don't need to go through the courts. We can just say, stop doing that, and you have to stop doing it. Like, that sounds like an autocratic state to me, mate.
I know. I mean, there's plenty of stuff. I get where people say, well, you're angry about this. Why aren't you angry about that? Well, I get that. And
there's only so many things I can give a fuck about at once.
And that's always my response, really. Like, how much life do you think I've got here?
Yeah.
And time. And,
yeah, by the way, we've got, like, I know we do this, like, as a podcast, but just so everyone knows, we have got plenty of stuff in our own lives to give a fuck about.
100%. And literally, like, footy's, like, fairly important in my life and always has been, as I said, near the top of the programme. So that's why we're doing footy. Do you know what I mean? Just sort of, the other thing as well, I touched on it before, is just the way it sort of like always goes down a banter route. And I'm absolutely convinced that, the clips of this show, the show itself will generate those type of comments because it will be served up by the internet, no doubt, to City fans if they're not some aren't listening anyway. And then it'll be like, look at this scouser here saying X, Y, and Z, and we'll get, water off a duck's back. I'm just, so bored of internet comments. It's untrue. But, it's like, you always get this thing that you're jealous. It's like the cry more thing I said before. You're like, well, you're just jealous. But, I'm not, because I don't want this for Liverpool. And I've gone on record and said I don't want this for Liverpool. And this will probably wind up these type of people even more. But when we won the league, or when we've won anything under these owners and the way we've won it, I think it's purer the way we've won it. I think we've won it as underdogs, as a side that is on a club that is operating in a fair manner, following the rules like the majority of clubs are also doing. We're not trying to backdoor it. We're not trying to do mad things. We're not, like looking for loopholes in legislation or rules or anything like that. We're just following the rules. We're spending money. We've got a good manager. We've got a great crowd. We're a great club, and we won stuff. And that to me feels much more pure than this. I would genuinely like to hear from like a City fan who's fair about this and intelligent and doesn't just want to make it about banter or getting one up on. And how do you feel about it? There must be some. I mean, I have spoken to some in the past who said it doesn't sit quite right. Of course not. but also what do you want me to do? It's my football club. And like I just said before, I've supported them all my life. So, you know, and I've had conversations with Reds, I know, where you go, what if it happened to Liverpool? Like, what would you do? And I always go, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like, because, you know, morally or you know, or whatever, like, you know, the way I talk about it, the way I think about it, I think probably I should fuck it off. But then, you know, then all of a sudden I just have this big, huge gap in my life. And, you know, the other considerations where you're like, but it took me so long to get that fucking season ticket. Do you know, you know, all of those things. And there must be some City fans who at least feel the same way. Yeah. There must be some Newcastle fans who are starting to feel the same way as well. Again, there's a line of them that will line up and argue with you black as white on their owners as well, and just say things like, yeah, but it's great for the club and it's great for the city, so I'm not arsed. And you're like, well, what about this? What about Khashoggi? What about Yemen? What about all the other stuff? I'm not arsed, mate. Oh, right, okay, sound.
But in fairness, mate, there's an element of me that go for those people who goes, sound. At least you're just fronting it again. Yeah. Like the Saudi boss who's just like, yeah, that is what we do. Does it, for me in life, I don't know, I've got to this place in my life where I just like people being real. And as long as you're being real and truthful, I'm not arsed. I'd rather you were an absolute arsehole and just fronted it to me than try to pretend and defend things
and argue forever.
And it's like, we can all see what's going on. Yeah. Like no one in their right mind can read that bit out or do that we were saying before about the link between the link. It's not even a fucking link, is it? Like the people who own Man City run the UAE. That's it. Like you can't. No one in their right mind can defend that. The people who run Newcastle
is the Saudi government.
The Saudi government. The people who back Chelsea is Saudi Arabian money. It's like why do we need to fucking go anywhere other than yes? I'd much prefer City fans, Newcastle fans, Chelsea fans who just go yes. Like that is what it is. In the same way that again, you know, to beat off. It's like. I'm doing loads of sales at the moment in my private life, and it's like dealing with objections before they come in. Before any other non-Liverpool fans start shouting at us. Yeah, but it's the same for us with people who have got, clubs who've got less money than us. If people shout at us, yeah, but you can spend more money than us. I go, yeah, we can. Yeah. We've got more money. Soz. Like, but we're doing it within the rules, as you say. And this is the other part of this for people who do the cry me a river type thing. I'm not complaining about how much money Villas
living in your head rent free.
But like, I'm not even complaining about how much. I was going to say I'm not complaining about how much money Villa spend. I'm not complaining about. I don't even complain how much money Chelsea spend. Chelsea feel like they've like found this loophole in the rules. Did you hate
Blackburn when Jack Walker spent a load of dough and they won the league?
Mate, I didn't hate Man United. Well, look, I hated Man United, but I hated them because of who they are and our rivals. I never hated them because they had more money to spend than us.
Well, no, because
that was that was shit. I wish we had a bit more money.
Yeah, and you used to think fucking hell, like Liverpool asleep at the wheel. Why, they were doing X, Y, and Z.
Exactly, that's what we were saying back then, and that's the point. But the difference here is, going back to that point that I was making a mess of before, like the way for us to compete arguably would be to cheat. For us to go, we'll just bend the rules
to a country.
Yeah, well, that's the other side. And that's the bit where it's like, well, we don't want to do that. We want to work within the rules. We want to keep, like, for all the criticism of FSG, and the reality is, and this is true, and I actually do hate the thing about talking about Liverpool fans or Man City fans or any club's fans, because that term is so broad now. It's almost meaningless. Do you know what I mean? What does that even mean? Me and you don't agree on everything. Yeah. Me and you definitely don't agree with, some of the people who fucking comment on our stuff all the time. And they are Liverpool fans. And you're like, how many Liverpool fans do we know? Who I don't know them personally, but because most people I know have got similar opinions to FSG to me within a boundary. Do you know what I mean? Some prefer them a bit more, some like them a bit less. But there's loads of Liverpool fans who wish we'd fuck off FSG and be bought by Qatar.
And don't give a fuck.
And they don't care.
No. Because they're just like, this is the way the footy's going, so we need to follow. It too. And it's like, okay, well, community values, moral. No, don't give a fuck about any of that. Just want Liverpool to win every transfer window, put the best players on the pitch in the world, and enjoy that. All right, okay, sound.
Yeah.
Bringing it back now to Man City and just sort of like the general kind of shrug that I feel there is sometimes about it, and like you hear all the time in the mainstream media discussed about how good a side they are, how good the manager is, how you can't look beyond them for the title, you can't look beyond them for the European Cup. You know what I mean? And you're like, I hear it every single week, and you're like, you know, and like it'll be like Henry Winter or something or whatever. And to be fair, I did hear him mention the charges actually when he was on the radio. I think it was last week. But it's like Jim White getting exasperated about it was wild on the radio earlier. Like he was like, oh, people just keep bringing up 115 charges. Well, they will do, Jim, because they feel that their club is being cheated out of something. They feel that it's an unfair fight, and you know, until that's resolved. And you know, if City were innocent in this, like you were saying before, well, get it resolved then.
Well, that was the bit I was just about to say.
Instead of putting like hurdles in the way all the time.
And this isn't just them though, is it? That's the bit that does my head in now. As soon as those charges were announced, for the sake of the competition, think about what's happened since the charges were announced. They've won a treble. They've won a fucking treble since those charges were announced, and it's still. Is there any news on when it's going to be resolved?
No.
So imagine,
we're talking years, apparently.
Imagine if like I'd been charged, like this isn't anonymous, like people having a pop. Imagine if I'd been charged with murder, and those charges were 2 years ago, and we're just getting on with life, and me and you were doing this podcast every week, and we're having a laugh.
It's really good on that podcast, yeah. He's one of the best podcasters out there. What about the murder thing?
And people are like, fucking hell, will you stop going on about the murder thing?
Yeah.
You're like,
you won't let it go.
Yeah, fucking just, I'm saying it on shows, just let it go, will you? I've got loads of evidence that proves I'm not a murderer. You're like, let's do the hearing then. Let's do the trial.
You'll see.
Yeah, I'll show you. Is there a time bar if you're going to be lawyer?
I'm just not telling you now.
Is there a time bar on this murder charge?
You'll see though.
But this is the point why I don't understand why there wasn't a massive push by everybody to be like, now these charges have been brought, get it resolved.
Yeah.
You've got 6 months because we can't have another season pass with this hanging over the sport.
But the mad thing is, and I've got it down here in the agenda, is I was thinking about this today when I was writing this up and everything, and you know, preparing for the show. And I was thinking, well, there will be people as well though in the running of football, you know, and all that encompasses, who will be saying things like, and I've heard that actually, will say things like, all the grounds are full. All the grounds are full. There's a huge demand for tickets. We're still getting bumper TV deals. We're getting bigger TV deals. We're getting TV deals from more and more countries around the world. Everyone wants to watch the Premier League. So I think I genuinely think there is a bit of a shrug going on where it's like, the product's not even being damaged there, because that's what they call it, isn't it? The product. Yeah. And it's like, you know, so you've got a team who have broken the rules. It's pretty fucking clear there, like, you know, for all this, oh, it's taken out of context, it's this, it's that, the other. The amount of times I've said to people who said that to me is, have you actually read the Spiegel stuff? Have you actually read the Football League stuff? Because it's fairly fucking damning, like, do you know what I mean? And the other sections of the media have been happy to reproduce the Spiegel stuff when they've been writing up stories. So, you know, like, I've made a huge, you know, agenda that we're probably not going to get to in the time we've got. And I've got stuff from Sky Sports, I've got stuff from the Times, you know. They're not shy of quoting that stuff. So they therefore are pretty happy that it's an accurate record of what went on. And they're also not clearly convinced by what City have to say about it. So I don't get, again, the sort of defence stuff, because, you know, the Premier League investigation is literally pinned on these leaks. That's where it come from. Same with the UEFA, you know, investigation. And then when they've asked for information, when they've asked for evidence, City are doing everything they can to block it. City are saying, is this even fair? City are launching this appeal here and getting this lawyer there and paying this fella, you know, as much as Kev De Bruyne to fight things legally and all the rest of it. And then there's loads of people just, you know, covering their eyes and sticking their fingers in their ears and saying, no, Scousers that. Scousers who are just jealous and that. Lord Panic is their fella that they've got knocking around to help them challenge all this. And they had, was it Panic on the Streets of London was the banner that they had at the game.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, and it's, you know, they were all. So
I can't believe that. None of them got his name on their shirts.
Probably
should have a squad number.
That'll be one moment. There is someone who's probably done that, and you know, they've booed the Premier League anthem. They boo the Champions League anthem. And I just wanted to sort of run through some of the stuff. Then, you know, we've mentioned some of it anyway, like, but some of the stuff that has already come out and is out there in the big wider world. We've already said that, City have said there is a comprehensive body of irrefutable evidence that exists in support of the club's position. So let us see it then. Let us have a big, nice read. But in the meantime, all we have got to read is reporting of lots of stuff that frankly fucking stinks. So City are being charged by the Premier League over breaking 115 financial rules across 14 seasons. It relates to the financial fair play rules, which of course you can circumnavigate by inflating how much you're earning or hiding how much you're spending. There's been a 4-year investigation as well. 4 years they've been looking into this. So it's not something, scribbled on the back of a ciggy packet because someone doesn't like them. City have been charged with breaches that required the club, according to the Premier League, to provide accurate financial information that gives a true and fair view of the club's financial position. They've been accused of failing to cooperate with the investigation. You had the situation, obviously, with UEFA. Their 2-year suspension from club competitions was overturned by the Court for Arbitration for Sport after initially being found guilty of serious breaches of financial fair play regulations between 2012 and 2016, and initially being banned for 2 years and initially being fined €30 million. It was overturned by CAS, but they still got fined €10 million for not cooperating. And there's the stuff Kopi mentioned earlier about most of the alleged breaches were either not established or time barred. Time barred doesn't mean it isn't a breach then, does it? And on we go. The sponsorship deals related to the Etihad airline and telecoms company Etisalat, with the allegations being that the money had actually come from Sheikh Mansour's ADUG group. City were first charged by UEFA in March 2019. That prompted the Premier League to launch their own investigation. So like I say, 4 years of this already and years more of it to come. Some of the stuff that's being reported, like I say, big organisations happy to put this on their website. Sky Sports said allegedly they did not fully disclose the financial remunerations that were made to one of their managers over a 4-year period. The suggestion is that there was a secret contract, so one of the managers was getting paid more than officially stated. The Times was happy to tell you that was Mancini. Kopi mentioned it before. It's alleged that City overstated sponsorship income, that they in effect doubled Mancini's wages. And this weird thing about committing to coaching the club out there for 4 days a year and being paid 1.75 million a year as a consultant for doing so.
Good consultancy rate, that, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
Beats mine. I might need to put my prices up.
It also included other stuff that was in this leaked contract, included a 4 million bonus for winning the Premier League, 3 million for Champions League, 8 flights a year between Manchester and Italy for Mancini and his family, $7,500 a month towards accommodation costs, and 6 tickets for each home match. Mancini has previously declined to comment when asked about all of that. Of course he has. The Spiegel also alleged that ADUG paid at least £3.5 million to Yaya Touré's agent between 2010 and 2015, while the midfielder was a City player, with the payments apparently cleared by the club's chief executive and chairman. One of the emails from City's then chief financial officer was headed cash flow and stated that Mansour's own company vehicle, the Abu Dhabi United Group, ADUG, we mentioned before, would be paying $57 million as a contribution to the 1340 sponsorship fee, while only $8 million was from Etihad's direct contribution. There was another one. And then there's the Simon Cliff also. He was the club's in-house lawyer. In one of the published emails, it said that it basically said that he would rather spend. This is relating to the chairman of Man City. He would rather spend 30 million on the 50 best lawyers in the world to sue UEFA for the next 10 years. And that's rather than accepting any kind of financial sanction. There was a very strange one, this one as well. So the IC, which is UEFA's investigatory chamber, they determined that City had a deficit of 180 million euros over a 2-year period, vastly in excess of the 45 million euros permitted by FFP rules. And in May that year, agreed a settlement. Some at UEFA believe was too lenient. A day before that, the former chair of the IC A former Prime Minister of Belgium, a senior EU politician, died at age 73. Spiegel quoted Cliff's reaction to this news in an internal email, referring to the membership of the IC and saying, 1 down, 6 to go. I mean, wow. Whacking that in a work email is a bit mad, isn't it?
Do you know what sorry to interrupt, one of my biggest points in all of this is especially the government. I was going to say about loads of these, that one in particular. It's funny that in a world in which the Freedom of Information Act exists, people are still exchanging emails with this shit
with this kind of stuff.
Do you know what I mean?
I know.
Like the UK government is sending emails to Abu Dhabi and you're like, lads, people can fucking request to see this now. And that for me, things like that frustrate me. I know this sounds like a mad thing to say. They almost frustrate me more than anything else because it shows the level of incompetence involved. Do you know what I mean? People are going to find these emails. Be careful what you say.
And obviously hackers as well, which is where all this came from.
Well, and look, in fairness, and again, I'm going to keep doing this, like throwing in the little defences. That line, we would rather spend 30 million on the 50 best lawyers in the world to sue UEFA for the next 10 years than pay a sanction. It's lines like that City get to say, you've taken that out of context. It's lines like the 1 down, 6 to go. They get to say, you've taken that out of context. And they're the bits where I'm like, forget them then. Forget the red herrings, forget the distractions, because they're the ones you get to point at. Let's just focus on all the other stuff. The facts, the allegations of financial impropriety, because that is black and white. This is the whole point of legal cases like this.
But did you
do that or not?
Yeah, and when we say as well, we called the show like it is the Premier League fucked. This is where, not only is this dragging on, and like you say, we're just continuing to watch this side clean up while they all fanny round legally. But the Times said as well that at least one club is prepared to take legal advice should financial irregularities be proved, given that they could have had a bearing on the title race and qualifications for Champions League. Now, what the Times made like a sort of a thing to show all the sides that have missed out because of what, Man City have been doing. And it's not just us, Man City have pipped United to the title. Man City, by finishing in Champions League places, have knocked the other sides out of them and things like that. So there are quite a few sides actually that could be. But we are getting a bit short on time now.
Look, just on that point, I think it's worth saying.
Go on.
I think that where you get to with stuff like this is, there almost becomes, there's a thing in law about like public policy. Like, I remember even studying this in uni where it's like, if we do this, does it open the floodgates? So is there a public policy argument that we shouldn't do it? Do you know what I mean? Like a wider thing, a mad analogy, right? A mad tangent. It's like the government saying, let's not tell everybody that there's fucking aliens because it'll cause society to melt down. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's like, you should just tell the truth. And but you can see how, when you're running a business or a company or a country, or you're managing kids, raising kids, there's certain things where you're like, okay, well, we need to manage this. I think this has got to a point now where it's such a fucking mess that if they do get done for this, it causes just chaos. Because where does that end? What you've just been saying, it's not just.
Well, if it is
they got in the
proven, what are you
Champions
going to
League.
do? What
Well,
are you
exactly,
going to do?
because you've got all you've got right. So
are you going to throw them out the league?
Well, even that, forget that. That's the most simple thing. Think of how many clubs would go, but hang on, because they cheated and they had that money, they bought our best player. And if they didn't buy our best player, we wouldn't have got relegated.
That's why I'm saying it all feels fucked.
And you're like, so where the fuck do we go from there? It's
an absolute mess, and it's all a mess because you allowed anyone to get hold of football clubs, and that's back to the what we were saying at the top. But just to reiterate the TalkSport thing, Jim White said today, someone has tweeted there's 115 charges. Some people just won't give up on this, and then you had Simon Jordan saying it's up to everyone else to up their game. Yeah, but everyone else isn't circumnavigating the rules, Simon. That's the fucking point.
It's funny that though, isn't it? Don't you think that's mad? That like fundamentally, and these are fellas who are meant to be straight talking fellas who like to be challenged and all that. It's up to others to up their game. It's like, but it's within the fucking rules. That's like saying someone who's been caught taking steroids. The counterpoint is, well, everyone else should get steroids then. Like, that isn't the point.
It isn't the point.
If the rules are not fair, change the fucking rules.
I like this tweet. I put out this morning that, we were doing this show and I said, send us some tweets if you like. And Michael Bennett did like. He sent us a tweet that says, the most annoying part is looking at our nearest rival in City and knowing that they're bending the rules, but no one does anything about it. It's like being fuming that next door's got a Lambo paid for by Ways and Means while you're working your arse off driving a Mondeo. Quite like that one. Let us know as well what you think about us doing, the odd show like this. So, we've got into a big meaty subject around football on a general, a general stance rather than it being Liverpool specific or whatever. I'm just thinking we could maybe do one of these every now and again, and it just sort of saves us from talking about like your arse or,
balls
or your balls or whatever.
Well, loads of bits of me to talk about now. So
I know. I want to quickly end then with a fact of the week. Don't worry, it's still here. I found one for you. I wanted to find something about Kirkdale because it is where I'm currently living, and so I thought, well, it'd be nice to throw in a fact about my current manor. So I'm throwing in Kirkdale Prison, which no longer exists, but was at a site taken in a road called North Dingle, Rumney Road, Garnet Avenue, and Sessions Road, which reflected the fact that there was a courthouse there. It's now described as recreation ground, and there's some swings and stuff for the kids like that there. It's a big site though, and it was said that when the jail opened it could hold the entire population of Liverpool. That was in the 19th century, of course. The mad thing about it is like shitloads of people got hung there.
Just read the next line.
And not only is it mad that shitloads of people got hung there, it's also mad that up to 100,000 people used to come and watch.
That's fucking mental. Think about that.
Really mad, isn't it? And people like railway firms used to put on special trains from other parts of Lancashire, which it was then, and across the northwest for people to come and turn up and watch people get hung. Kirkdale Jail, it was known as the Kirkdale House of Correction. It had 6 wings and a central tower, opened in 1819. Executions began in 1835 with someone called James Barlow and ended with the hanging of John Conway there in 20th of August 1891. Yeah, and there's a report of one of the hangings. There was a quadruple execution in 1863. And it said that 270 policemen were on hand to control the crowd, estimated at 100,000 people. When the jail closed, the bodies of those executed were exhumed and reburied at the cemetery in Longmore Lane in Fazakerley. That was 1893. Prisoners had to work they had a treadmill used for grinding corn, the largest in the country, needing the efforts of 130 prisoners a day to keep it running. It once had one of the highest death rates in the country for a prison. And a report written in 1844 said 50% were unable to name months of the year, 39% couldn't name the reigning monarch, 43 were ignorant of words such as virtue, vice, and righteousness, and 15% were unable to count to 100. 67 executions were held there, and yet the highest being that 4 at one time that I mentioned before. And yet the paths are supposedly still visible on that recreation ground. And there's also a wall around it as well. I don't know whether that is the original wall. Also as well, Liverpool does have the dubious tag of jointly being the last place a person was executed. So when I'm talking about that and you're thinking 1800 this, 1800 that, seems like a very, very long time ago, doesn't it? The last person to be executed in this country was 59 years ago.
That's mad.
13th of August 1964, it was actually 2 fellas, Peter Allen, originally from Wallasey, and Gwyn Evans, both led from their cells at the same time to be hung. And one was at Walton, the Peter Allen one, and Gwyn Evans, he was executed in strange ways in Manchester.
Do you know what's funny? The things my brain picks out. I always do this. It says, Peter Allen and Gwyn Evans were led from their cells to the gallows. 10 seconds later, they were dead. That's fucking efficient, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
How fast is that fucking hangman?
I know.
It's like, fucking hell, lads, got to get home for me tea, yeah? 10 seconds, count that.
Floor just drops out, doesn't it? And you're like...
Yeah, but they're led from the cells to the gallows. How close were the gallows?
Well, they were in the prison.
No, I know that, but 10 seconds isn't very long, is it? To get them out the cell, in the noose, and be dead. It's a fucking efficient hangman, that.
Yeah, they
Do you
made
reckon he
it.
knew it was his last one? He was the one to do a good job.
They murdered John West, a 53-year-old laundry company driver who was bludgeoned and stabbed to death in his home in Cumbria in 1964.
It's mad that it was that recent, wasn't it?
I know. And the death penalty was abolished 15 months later.
Oh, well, look, to tie it all in, this is a fucking brutal thing to tie our thing back into. In 1964, Peter Allen and Gwyn Evans, on the 7th of April, murdered someone. And on the 13th of August, they were fucking hanged. Didn't take them fucking long to sort that investigation, did it?
I know. Any chance to Premier League? What a lovely way to tie it up. Let us know what you think of the show. Do all the usual things. Get on the Patreon, as it says on the board. There's about 20 odd shows on there now, so you're getting value for money for your £1 a week if you want to support what we're doing. And do support it, because look, pretty soon I might be making boxes in a fucking factory or something, the way things are going. Up the Reds, see you in a bit.